GM, and welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show that we run from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, it's going to be Sammy and me hosting, as you can probably already tell by the different choice of music. And we're going to talk, nonetheless, about all things in the NFT market, the crypto market, and basically every market that we want to trade on. Maybe also the IT outage, the Microsoft shorting market could be a topic today. But no matter which market we are touching on whatever we are saying, nothing that we do up on stage, nothing that we say up on stage is financial advice. With that out of the way, Sammy, how are you feeling?
I'm good. It's been being on Apple, at least I can access the internet and my computer and stuff like that. So I wonder if we're going to see a drop in numbers of people because they can't get on their devices, their Microsoft devices.
Isn't that wonderful? Just the perfect occasion once more to troll Windows users. I mean, I'm saying that I have a MacBook. I also have a Windows PC, but I'm mostly using the MacBook. I had the Windows PC actually for gaming, but then I never really had time for gaming. So what I ended up doing was basically using the big screen from the Windows PC as a second screen to my MacBook. And whenever I play actually games, I use NVIDIA's GeForce Now, which is the streaming service, and I stream it via my TV. But GeForce Now is also not working because they are also affected by the Microsoft outage.
Geez, that sounds complicated. Yeah, I've literally just got two MacBooks, just dual purpose, running it back. But we actually had a modern market meetup yesterday, which was great fun. So yeah, caught up on a few things, had a few new faces join. So yeah, good to get into the market.
Yeah, how was the meetup yesterday? I mean, it's one of the meetups that I unfortunately missed because I wasn't in London. By that extension, also missed John from Playember, who reached out because they are shooting their show today. They're shooting in London actually, and I would have loved to swing by the set to join the meeting yesterday, but I couldn't. But yeah, tell me more. How was it yesterday in the evening?
It's good. I think, well, with that, just on the point around the MB, like walking around in that hot costume with this kind of weather, I don't envy that guy that's going to be doing that. But I'm intrigued by the footage that they get. Apparently, they're in spoons at some point this morning, or they were at some point this morning. So get the footage out, see what it's like, British. But yeah, no, the catch up was good. I think we had about 18 people in total, which was a good meetup in Victoria. And yeah, just chatted about all things blockchain. We touched on layer twos. We touched on ape chain, which I think we'll be discussing later. So yeah, great convo. If you're in London and you're a listener, let us know, and we'll invite you to the next monthly meetup.
Absolutely, yeah. And one more point before we get into the news. Funky was sharing in the YouTube comments that we are one subscriber off on YouTube from hitting actually our first 400 subscribers, which is pretty insane given the growth that we've seen on YouTube and how we started out as a spaces only. Anyhow, I think we have a lot to discuss today, so let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight into it, starting with the price action. Generally, Bitcoin is up a touch to 64K, up 0.3%. ETH doing the very same thing and sitting at 3.4K. Solana is at $162, which is a plus of 0.46% over the last 24 hours. In terms of the news, I'm sharing the snapshot on screen for those watching us on YouTube or on the live stream on X. We have 3 headlines to go through today. We have the massive run, MIGGLES on base, 75M. I think actually we're up to 80M in 2 days after Coinbase has been pushing remixing NFTs. Second piece of news that I'm quite excited to discuss is Yuga Labs partnering up with Pixel Vault. Yuga Labs commenting that as part of this partnership, the Reboot protocol, which is one that we've certainly discussed extensively on the show, will be migrating to ApeChain, opening up a new crypto primitive, not just for other sites, but other third-party developers on the chain as well. And last but not least, 5 entities, including Animoca brands, win the participation in stablecoin issuer sandbox in Hong Kong, and rightly so. Captain was asking, what the hell is a stablecoin issuer sandbox? We will get into that as part of the news a bit later in today's show. Moving on to the notable sales, we have a Fidenza that sold for 33.6 ETH. We have a Ryan Koopmans, the Atlas, that actually sold. We have this up on screen for 0.5 BTC. And moving to our NFT marketplace and platform partner Mintify to have a more general look at the rest of the NFT market, we see Azuki's being up a fair bit at a 4.16, 4.17 ETH floor, constituting a plus of almost 8%. Bored Apes flat from yesterday, sitting at a 9.4 ETH floor. Captains are up a touch. Miladys are up 1%, back to almost a 5.1 ETH floor. And Pudgy Penguins also pretty much flat, sitting at 10.6 ETH. Apart from those main collections, Sammy, anything in the NFT market that's standing out to you?
So Creeps seems to have pumped about 20 odd percent. I looked and had a look, and it's so introducing Ziggy, a half intergalactic bro dude, half Nikola Tesla lizard. So obviously they resonate with that. I don't know specifically what this is in relation to, but there's an animated guy, and Joe, who's one of the founders, says buckle up. So maybe they've got some inside goss within the closed parts of the Discord. But that seems to be on a bit of a tear. And this project, so this minted, for those that don't know, this minted back in January, I think it's 2022. I think they ran up to about a 10 ETH, maybe even higher floor, so around about 40K at the time. And then, yeah, had the whole, I think it's Lumi, was it Lumi? The token that then ended up being consolidated into Lamex, and then they had effectively affiliations with Portal, which released this year. So it'd be interesting to see what's next for the Creeps ecosystem. But I mean, many people probably describe this as a bit of a cult. I've got friends in real life that actually came into crypto through Creeps, and they're diehard fans. They've got their mums, fathers, like all relatives involved. So yeah, I'm interested to see where this one goes.
Yeah, Creeps are something special. Like, they really managed to build more than a community, actually build a cult. I remember when they were pumping for the first time and going towards the 10 ETH floor, the Discord voice chat, that attendance rate in there was insane. They basically were live all of the time. And I remember people being super happy because you have this like conspiracy theory trades with Creeps, with it's flat, bro, and a picture of a flat earth, etc. And some people were like, legit, Creeps has changed my life. Printing 10K a day with the Lumi token, thinking this is gonna go on forever. Or other people who shared either trolling or serious, hard to tell sometimes, but nonetheless entertaining, that for the first time in Web3, they felt heard because they can talk about the flat earth, because they can talk about other things. But it was a hilarious Discord to be around.
They even had a Lambo countdown. So based on the amount that they were generating in Lumi, they had a literal Lambo, a Lamborghini countdown as to when they can afford a Lambo, which I found crazy.
Yeah, I love it. Did you ever own a Creep?
No, I didn't. I had the typical British style. I went out for drinks. I had a few free passes to mint. I think you got 3 Creeps per mint pass. And my mate had too many, and he was like, "Look, I don't want to mint them all. Do you want to just take 2 of these?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll take them." Didn't really think much of it, but went out, had a few beers, missed the mint, and then saw them absolutely rip. So missed out.
Oh wait, yeah, I had a couple, but flipped all but one, which I ended up selling at some point this year. But it was a fun journey for sure. Look, here's what I want to do in terms of the news. Before we get into the first piece of news, into the MIGGLES run, which quite frankly will be a rather short one to touch on because there's not so much to say on it, in my opinion. Actually want to have a discussion point for today around ETH Beta Plays. There was a post that Brad has made that came to my attention, reposting this tweet. And this person, Thor Hardvigsen, was claiming or was saying buying ETH Beta Plays is a recipe for disaster, as the ETH ETFs are set up to go live next week. We discussed them extensively yesterday. Many will be looking for so-called ETH Beta Plays as a way to capture high return if flows are positive. From a narratives perspective, this might seem like a good idea as capital moves up the risk curve. It turns out, however, that unless you're able to find a needle in a haystack, you are likely to be disappointed. And then he goes on, we're sharing all of that on screen, to show 3 charts where the main takeaways are that year to date, not a single L2 token has been able to outperform ETH itself. Then the second plot chart showing that from a sample of 24 quote unquote ETH beta tokens, most are not as correlated with ETH as you might think. And lastly, that the year-to-date beta coefficients of these alts in relation to ETH are also lacking. And Brad reposted that saying, call me crazy, but this tells me to watch L2s as a beta play. Once again, if ETH returns to price discovery, market is going to try and assign a beta tag to something once ETH pumps, and all L2s pumped against ETH when that happened last time. Makes me think we try again. Now, I know like this idea of ETH beta plays, what's the beta play to ETH pumping to whatever else is going on, is something that we've been discussing for quite a while on the show. So quite curious, given these two posts, Sammy, to get your first thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think bearing in mind that I guess we could say we've started in a bull market, but I think historically over the past couple of years it's been a pretty solid bear market. So I think people would have consolidated in the majors anyway. So I think any altcoin has historically got wrecked over the past sort of 18 months, 2 years, apart from that pump in the first part of this year. I do think that once we see price discovery, I agree with Brett that there could be potential beta plays there, and just it is natural human instinct to be like, well, I've missed out on that. What can I chase next? And I think the wisdom of crowds, like ultimately they probably come to some sort of consensus as to what those beta plays might be. And I mean, the logical thing is to look for those L2s or things like restaking narratives and that kind of stuff that could be construed as beta plays. But yeah, it's hard to pick which ones will be those winners. But I think ultimately any high performing L2s with decent activity that are struggling on price, I think are pretty good options. I think Brett did another one actually where it compared the fees to the market cap of the token. And that could probably be a pretty good way of looking at it. Okay, well, what protocols have high fees? And which ones are low valued in comparison to their fees that are related to ETH. That could be a decent play for various ETH betas. Yeah, and I guess the alternative is looking at alt L1s, so like Solana and stuff like that. But I do think that once we see new like significant blow off tops for Bitcoin, ETH, like those majors, I think that wealth effect is going to flow down to the alternative coins that we've seen in previous cycles, and eventually probably NFTs.
I mean, it kind of follows the same line of thought that we discussed on yesterday's show when we were talking about TON and what has to happen for TON that it still plays out and pays off to buy into that token, into the Telegram ecosystem right now. And you made the very fair point that you can't just look at TON in isolation, because ultimately if the market will move, there will be this trickle down effect and it won't stop at the majors. It will go into other coins as well. And then I think the question really becomes, do you want to follow the meme coin narrative and make the point that MOG and other main meme coins might also be beta plays in the sense that the trickle down effect goes to them? Or do you think that we will have that reversal to some kind of value, whether that's the DeFi narrative, which is also something that Brad pointed out and that we talked about, or it's the L2 narrative, and you're going to look at things like the fee structure, the actual revenue that those infrastructure protocols, L2s, DeFi protocols, whatever they are generating, or if you just don't think that this is the time and place to do that?
Well, I think we actually had a discussion last night after a few drinks, and I think the general consensus was like a lot of the capital that's going to be coming in is from institutions. So they're likely going to be going for those fully diluted tokens from like the Aves, the MakerDAO, all this kind of stuff that has a reasonable float. Like it's pretty much all the vesting's been like taken out, and like they're fee earning coins, because that's ultimately what institutions look for. Like what can I find that has real cash flows? Whereas I think meme coins, because it's so speculative, I just can't see any institution that's going to be like, okay, well, I want like decent exposure to this, I'm going to deploy capital, which doesn't make sense to me. Like maybe there might be like a meme coin index at some point, but I think it's incredibly high risk, and more likely is probably going to be these fee generating protocols that are fully diluted.
Yeah, I very much agree. Although with that yesterday, when we had the discussion on the ETH ETFs and on that price structure, there were actually two different ETFs, not spot but future, that one is a bullish one, one's a bearish one. I don't remember the issuing company tracking the market, and the bullish one was basically a 2x leveraged futures ETF on a crypto basket called Lambo, and the bearish one was called Rect. So it's quite interesting to see that even with Bitcoin, the BTC ETF, one of them is called HODL, has the HODL ticker, that this mimetic culture is going so far that it's actually impacting on the tickers of how some ETFs are named, which I don't know. I find it, I mean, yes, you can say it's hilarious, but I actually find it quite meaningful that in essence it says that this culture is taken seriously and it actually manages to grow beyond this Web3 core bubble, but have an impact on how TradFi companies are naming their products because they think it is relevant and they think that someone will find that funny, entertaining, and might have a preference to buy the HODL BTC ETF versus another one, given that both of these ETFs would have the same fee structure.
Yeah, definitely. It seems a massive coincidence because you've even got the BlackRock Biddle Fund, like is it BlackRock USD Institutional Digital Liquidity Fund? So, I mean, that's now up to 500 million. But I mean, it can't be a coincidence that it's just, yeah, it does seem like it probably plays into it to an extent, at least if it's subconsciously.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with that. Look, shall we get into the first piece of news? Get into the MIGGLES coin. I think Tyler just posted a couple of minutes ago. MIGGLES is just not stopping and definitely not faced by any global cyber outages. It's up another 93% on the day, 76M. That puts it within 30% of flipping Toshi and becoming the number 2 meme coin on base behind Bread. And it's only 3 days old. It's also another look at the chart on CoinMarketCap. Sammy, unless you have anything specific to say on MIGGLES or on the base meme meta, I'd straight move on to the second piece of news, but want to give you a chance to chime in.
Probably the only thing that I'd say is obviously this is what people wanted. It wasn't an NFT. I think when I saw the cat video, I thought, okay, well, they're listing PopCat or Mog, which just didn't seem to be the case. And when they were saying, okay, well, here's the actual NFT mint link, I was just like, okay, well, that's a bit underwhelming. I just didn't have the foresight to think, okay, well, someone's going to launch that MIGGLES token and it's going to pop off. But it does make sense in hindsight.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And I know it's getting to this extent that a friend of mine, I had a call with him in the morning, told me he got up at 3:45 a.m. my time so that he can catch Trump's speech at the convention, and basically on one screen listening to Trump, on the other tracking the meme coin market and see whatever he's saying, what will be turned into a meme and what is worth buying, and trading on that. And you also had like a good amount of polymarket bets around his speech specifically. Will he say the word Mog? Will he say the word God? What will he say? And turn that into a bet as well, which I find hilarious. End of the day, my friend said it wasn't really worth it to get up that early because none of those meme coins really got any traction. But it's definitely an interesting meta.
But I guess also you got to work out, and I guess this is where the on-chain analysis comes in, like where the majority of those holders are. Because if obviously you're getting up at an obscure time that they don't tend to trade, then it's probably not going to be sufficient liquidity to move the market. Whereas if it's prime time and he's speaking at the moment that they're all awake, then obviously it's probably going to trade with what's going on. We kind of saw this in 2021 with Musk and Doge, because ultimately he was the main driver of the Doge price action. So we saw that in May when he went on the Saturday Night Live, and I think this has effectively taken the next iteration of meme coins. But I mean, yeah, it's going to be here to stay, and I'm definitely looking at Moonshot and a few other token sort of platforms, meme coin platforms.
Yeah, interesting. Moonshot is one that is starting to populate my feed more and more again over the last couple of days. I feel like they also had a bit of a KOL activation going on.
Yeah, they've so I saw Carbon and a few other pretty big accounts have suddenly started rocking the badge, and so yeah, I suspect they're getting people onboarded.
Yeah, absolutely. Funky, I see you with your hand up. Welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on our little meme coin / political discussion?
GM, everyone. Yeah, just as sort of the U.S. political correspondent, I want to weigh in here because you talked about Trump, and I'm sure some of you have seen this. That there is a lot of speculation that at Bitcoin Nashville, he is going to announce that Bitcoin would become a U.S. strategic reserve asset. Can you imagine the God candle? If he even says it, I think it's going to absolutely rip. Like, we're going to see a big candle if that happens. And I'm 99% sure that the US government is still the largest holder of Bitcoin because of all the stuff that they've claimed over the years. And so they'd already have like a big war chest, which would just be crazy. And can you imagine the FOMO from other sovereign nations to add that?
Yeah, I think I did have a look at the on-chain like Bitcoin wallet holdings, and I think the Bitfinex hack from, was it 2013, and the Silk Road stuff, I think that totals up to around about 180k Bitcoin, and then they've seized a bunch of Bitcoin from other places. I saw OSF posted today or yesterday that they've got 210k Bitcoin. So I mean, they've definitely got the holdings to have that clout, especially if Bitcoin runs to over 100k or whatever. Like, that's going to be a significant amount of treasury in reserve.
Yeah, 180k BTC is 11.5 B. That's quite a significant amount. But yeah, we definitely saw that. It's also part of the further news in the snapshot. I think it would be very interesting to see that playing out in contrast with Germany selling their BTC holdings. And if Trump would say that, I wouldn't only be looking forward, to that God candle, but also be looking forward to the amount of Germany trolling that I would get to enjoy on the timeline.
Yeah, I think there was something else I found interesting as well, because you've obviously got Germany selling the Bitcoin, or they've sold it now, and Mt. Gox distributing. But I think there's, out of the top 20 wallets, there's a significant portion is from like anonymous wallets that are known as like Mr. 100, Mr. 5000, who are basically accumulating in those kind of clip sizes. And no one really knows who those people actually are. So if you suddenly, it gets revealed that these are other governments that have just been accumulating anonymously in the background, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Funky, you also have shared a Substack article in our Discord from the Red Phone Substack, which is basically a story in more than 40 points of Bitcoin's history. And I think it gets really interesting around like point 20-ish, where basically, where is the gist of it? Yeah, point 29 in that story. Who's moving first? What titan dares to step forward? Who pushes Bitcoin above 100K? The answer doesn't really matter. The hallowed land of six figure is coming. I'm certain, yada, yada, yada. And the big point is to say that basically the structure of this cycle is very different than the rest, because its participants come with different minds and different back sizes. In terms of that, it's basically a game of waiting from TradFi to see who's the first one to act, who's the first one to really make a big push for Bitcoin. And I feel like that a lot of the market is kind of waiting on one strong sign of confidence that could ultimately lead to this push. And I wouldn't be surprised if this Bitcoin National Reserve announcement plans, however you want to phrase that, by Trump could be this one thing to give it exactly this push that we probably still need.
Yeah, I don't know. You say that, but I mean, you've got BlackRock coming out with Larry Fink basically saying like he's wrong about Bitcoin, and they're looking to kind of go balls deep in it. Same with like Jamie Dimon for JP Morgan. You've got Goldman Sachs rolling out 4 tokenization initiatives. Like, it's all happening. I just don't know what, I mean, yeah, you just need like a formal seal of approval from the potential future president. And yeah, it could be game on.
It's kind of maybe a bit of peace of mind that you have with it, because you just had Germany selling their BTC and you just don't know what the states are going to do with theirs. And if you have this, as you call it, like the formal seal of approval, which doesn't even need to mean that they're going to market by a shit ton of BTC, which most certainly won't be the case, just means that they're not selling the 180K, 210K, whatever the amount of Bitcoin is, the more than $10 billion for sure. BTC, that this is a very positive sign to not be afraid of having a potential 10-figure dumper waiting for you to pump the price up previously.
Yeah, I definitely feel you. It feels like the same with the NFT market on Blur. Just when you've got those whales, you don't want to buy it. So
yeah, exactly. It's just the same game at a bigger scale. Funky, let's gonna go to you to put a wrap on this topic before we move on into the next piece of news.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, notwithstanding what Sammy brought up about Larry Fink and Jamie Dimon and everybody else, the TradFi world knows, right? Like that. What I think the difference is here is if he says this is getting like all the MAGA people on board, like people who might not have any kind of touchstone to crypto, that are just like middle America folks that are tired of watching their savings be depleted and the erosion of purchasing power and stuff like that. I mean, how many people are going to open up a Coinbase account, and even if they just start buying Bitcoin, even if it's like, you know, small amounts, just the fact that it's going to put it more on the radar of casual get her done Americans is something I think that maybe people are not appreciating enough. So I'll just say it.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very fair point. All right, let's get into the next piece of news. Let's get straight into Yuga's announcement. I'm gonna read parts of that and also go to Garga's post on that. It provided a bit of additional commentary that I think is quite helpful. Yuga's saying other side is preparing for its next Odyssey. Yuga is proud to partner with Pixel Vault to bring skill-based wagering to other side Meta and other future products via Reboot GG. As part of this partnership, the Reboot protocol will be migrating to ApeChain. This opens up a new crypto primitive, not just for other side, but other third-party developers on the chain as well. And then Garga went on to have a bit of a longer post on that, explaining some of the details and his thoughts on that partnership. And he's saying, stoked to share that we've entered a deep partnership with our friends over at Pixel Vault. This time, we're bringing the Reboot protocol onto ApeChain so it can be used for other side and other products we got in the hopper. For those who don't know it, a Reboot is a protocol for enabling cash and crypto-based rewards for skill-based games. Imagine battle royale experiences where different players and teams are wagering on who will be the eventual winner. Our wagering added to TCG tournaments or other skill-based on-chain games. The possibilities are endless. As we head into this next chapter of Other Side, enabling first-of-its-kind action gameplay with unheard of concurrency, 3K plus players, team fights, and other insanity, integrating the protocol with Other Side just makes sense. We're working together to make sure Reboot can be used in Yuga-developed experiences, but also UGC-created ones via the ODK. Reboot is also its own permissionless protocol, so it will also be available to other third-party devs building on ApeChain. I have quite a couple thoughts on that, but Sammy, want to go to you first for your initial reaction?
Well, I think you want as many apps on the chain as possible to try and kind of get that value accrual to ape holders. So I think that, I mean, I like what Pixel Vault have done. I mean, I've played Wolf Game. I can see the stuff they're rolling out there on, or like G-Funk's rolling out there on Blast. I think that, I mean, there's a whole discussion that you can have around L2s and fragmented liquidity and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think that the ape community had this ape token that was kind of launched, was it over a year ago, 2 years ago? There hasn't really been too much in terms of syncs. It's been kind of a governance token. But I think what happens when, or if, like a proposal is put forward to then use ape as a gas token, like all of a sudden you've got all these potential protocols on ape chain using this token, burning it, or going to validators and then redistributed as like gas tokens back to apps to incentivize further building. So I think there's like a huge potential that they could do stuff with this. I think it's pretty bullish. Like, it can't really, I mean, sentiment around sort of Bored Apes and the ecosystem is not great at the moment. So I think anything to kind of revive that and drive value back to those holders is a good thing. But yeah, I'm keen to see how it's rolled out, because ultimately it comes down to execution. Like, can you get players to use these games on this chain? Is it seamless? What's the user experience like? And that's something that I'd definitely be looking at.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. I also see, before I'm going to go to my thoughts, see Tiro quite passionate in the YouTube comments, and also with his hand up. Tiro, just want to go straight to you. What are your thoughts on the Yuga Labs X Pixel Vault partnership?
I just don't understand what Yuga's trying to do. They've told us that they are not a gaming company when they fired their former CEO, Daniel Legre, who was the CEO of Activision Blizzard. If they're going to keep going with this other side thing, and now we're betting on the other side, it's like, when do we see the other side? They've only done 3 play tests. They were supposed to do, like, I think it was 11 or 12 of them. So the rate that they're putting out material, I'm not seeing the footage. I'm not seeing the development of the game. I don't see Dookie Dash that's going to be reskinned for the 3rd time. The gaming part of that whole ecosystem is falling apart, and they're, I feel like, grasping for straws here with partnerships to try to get as much activation within this L3 that they put out on Arbitrum, and they need as much traffic and volume as they can get, and they'll take anything they can because they need to do something with ApeCoin, because they need to have syncs. That's why it was at $27 and it's now under $1. It's they need to do something, but you have to have something sustainable, a game, some kind of competition or betting or something. Betting would probably be the easiest, to be honest with you. You see what Polymark is doing. That would be a huge thing if somebody would set up that on an L2 or L3 and kind of play that out. But yeah, that's my thoughts, and that's just how I feel. I just don't feel like they're a gaming company. They should stick to being a club. That's what they were founded on, as what I think they were founded on. So that's just my opinion. But
yeah, no, that's a fair point of criticism. The alternative perspective to that would be to say that by partnering up with Pixel Vault, and obviously I might be biased since I am, or I have been, a day one Pixel Vault holder, but I actually think that what they have been building with Reboot Protocol is quite cool. And if that is able to integrate with other side, and if that's able to integrate with ApeChain, that actually might take a fair bit of lift and work off Yuga's shoulders, and have that in the hands of a Reboot, of the Pixel Vault team, who might be better suitable to build on that. So if they want to focus more on the club but still have the gaming side of things, it makes sense for them to push back maybe on the initial strategy of wanting to do everything in-house and having a bit more external partnerships and dependencies. And ultimately, that's like, a very, very strategic question, how you want to position yourself. We had Austin from Doodles with us yesterday, so in the audience today, explaining the Doodles model and how they are trying to do a lot of things which are their core focus in-house. And that is obviously a very valid strategy as well. But I feel like with Yuga trying to not continue doing 100 things at once, it actually makes sense for them to go for this partnership. And it also, if you look at the initial announcement by Yuga Labs, I feel like both those sentiments are very well reflected in the comments. So both your perspective, Tiro, as well as my counter perspective to that, with some of the gaming crowd like Yellow Panther being rather skeptical, saying, I really don't know what you guys are doing, man. On the other hand, Matt Stefanina saying that he's excited how this will take shape and be more positive of that. Obviously, also Beanie coming in, quote, reposting himself with a tweet from June 1st, where he said, Pixel Vault X Yuga in before the ink dries. Just a little side note on that. But anyhow, I think that it is fair to see both a bit of criticism and excitement, like that split across the community or the reactions. But just from my more trying to come from a strategic perspective, what they're focusing on, I can understand why they go for this move, and I actually think it can play out quite nicely for them. Sammy, based on what Tyr and I have been saying, do you have an additional reflection on that?
I mean, I get both. I get both perspectives because it is confusing from a gaming standpoint when you've kind of gone against it. But ultimately, from a if I focus on the ape coin, like the ape token specifically, and driving value back there, because if you look at the chart, it's not pretty. And I think that you need to have those syncs. So the more apps, protocols, whether they're gaming or otherwise, on a chain doing activity, using the token, I think that's pretty bullish for that particular ecosystem. But yeah, I think that the communication around, okay, well, segregating what is the club part of the Yuga Labs ecosystem and what is going to be like related to this on-chain activity, and being very, very clear about that so people aren't like there's no ambiguity, I think is important as well.
I think the challenge that kind of stems from this is if you have those external partnerships, you will also have a multi-token ecosystem at the end of the day, because you will have important strategic partners that like fulfill core functions of your ecosystem. And if you're building in Web3, which Yuga obviously is, it's not unlikely that these partners already have their own token, and kind of bringing all of that together, and still having like a focus on ApeCoin, but also knowing that your partners will intrinsically also want to focus on their own tokens as well, and kind of figuring out how Ape can be basically the connective tissue in this ecosystem. I think this is going to be a major challenge. And I think this is maybe not as straightforward as for a company like Animoca Brands with the Mocha token, where they basically can explain that synergistic factor quite easily by saying we have, I think they had an announcement today for 540 portfolio companies. They have their loyalty program, and they have just a token that connects all of that. That's, I think, simpler to understand than basically the situation with ApeCoin and now more partners coming in. I don't think that it's something that cannot be solved, but I just feel like it's a more complex challenge.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think, I mean, just from a structure point of view, if you've got portfolio companies, some of those are going to be subsidiaries, some of those are going to be you're going to have significant influence over, or like at least a reasonable stake in. So you're more likely going to encourage them to use the Mocha token as their primary token, and then the secondary token integrated somehow. Whereas I think with the Ape ecosystem, there definitely will be challenges like negotiating what that deal looks like to bring that particular external company on chain, because they don't own them. They might have a vested interest in some way, but I think it ultimately comes down to the negotiation. That's very difficult to do when you don't have that same vested interest. So maybe it would be a case of trying to align those interests somehow, and whether that means a token swap or whether that means other avenues that could potentially like lock up dual tokens to then both have a stake in that particular arrangement. It'd be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very, very fair point. And I think it might also be the fact that Yuga started out with the club, took on all the other things, took on the gaming side, decided to basically pivot again, restructure, reprioritize a bit. And obviously, with those things, a lot of things have happened around the Ape token as well. And I just think that the strategy they're following right now has a good chance of working in the mid to long term. But I feel like there will, at least in the short term, still be a lot of pushback, still be a lot of communication that comes from them that won't be always received very, very positively, because people will look back on the past and kind of not be so sure if this course is here to stay, or if there's going to be a pivot in the future soon. But anyhow, I do think this partnership makes a lot of sense and is very much a net positive. With that being said, what I want to do before we get into the last piece of news, into the last headline, take a look at the Web3 Roundup, which I am sharing on screen for those watching on X or for those watching us live on YouTube. And as the first piece of news, we have something we just discussed on the show: BTC as a reserve asset for the United States under Trump. Those rumors are starting to circulate more and more and more in CryptoSlate. It's also saying industry sources think Trump may announce Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. We have, as the second piece of news, Shape announcing its layer 2 for creators, with actually 80% of the sequencer fees going back to contract owners. A bit more explanation from Shape is given in one of the posts, and it reads like this: the network directs 80% of sequencer fees back to contract owners. For the remaining 20% of fees, 15% go to the Optimism Collective to fund public goods, and 5% go to infrastructure and the Shape Foundation during the early stages of this network. Then, third piece of news, the $235 million hack from the Indian crypto exchange was here. Seems like hackers hacked the multi-sig, is 0x NGMI's comment on that, and replaced the data being signed from something benign to draining transaction. And owners signed the malicious transactions thinking it was something else. Fourth piece of news, Grayscale lowering the ETF fees to 15 base points with a full waiver for the first $2 billion in inflows. Kind of interesting to have this very, very rapid adjustment of the fees. I think we had this discussion yesterday on the Grayscale Trust with the 2.5% fees, and the mini ETH ETF with the 25 base points, which was very much in line with the other ETF issuers, some of them undercutting it by 4, respectively 6 base points, so 0.21 or 0.19, and now Grayscale actually wanting to be the one with the lowest fees. In terms of other news, we have other side announcing Project Dragon for all Yuga Labs IP. Project Dragon, July 27, 2024, noon ET, Meebits, Voyagers, Codas, Sport Apes, Mutant Apes, Kennels, Grail, Moonbirds, Kodamara, and HVs can all attend. More info to come. Also seen Moonbirds moving up a fair bit yesterday, which we touched on, might be in conjunction with that piece of news. And then we have decentralized Untitled Mint soaring to a 0.09 BTC floor from $100 mint. And as the last piece of news, Meta announcing that they will not offer future multimodal AI models in the European Union, citing regulatory uncertainty. Kind of also falls in line with what we've seen from Apple. I think Apple is bound for a revamp of Siri, where Siri is basically still the default entity to give you an answer. But in case that this answer is not enough, Siri will be falling back to ChatGPT. And from what it seems like now, that is actually something that's not going to be available, at least not from the get-go, in the European Union for exactly those regulatory reasons and regulatory concerns. With the snapshot, with the roundup out of the way, let's get into the last piece of news. Actually, quite an interesting one. I have an article by CoinDesk that I'm sharing to go through this, and it is on Wednesday, Hong Kong Central Bank basically announced that they plan to present a bill on fiat reference stablecoins to the Legislative Council later this year. And as part of that, they are setting up a regulatory sandbox, so basically a framework where you can experiment with new tech. And there have been 5 entities, or there are 5 entities who have won this participation in the stablecoin issuer sandbox. It's the Standard Chartered Bank in Hong Kong, it's Animoca Brands, it's Jingdong CoinLink Technology, RD Innotech, and the Hong Kong Telecommunications Company as the winning entities in that. And I think it's quite interesting. Just to provide a bit more context, in March, Hong Kong started this regulatory sandbox to give potential stablecoin issuers immunity in testing certain operations. There's a quote in this article: during the assessment process, these institutions were able to demonstrate genuine interest in developing a stablecoin issuance business in Hong Kong with a reasonable business plan, and that the proposed operations under the sandbox arrangement would be conducted within a limited scope and in a risk controllable manner, the announcement said. And just as the final bit of info, at the moment, the participants will not handle the general public's funds and will not solicit funding from the public or offer any products associated with the sandbox. But the HKMA didn't rule out this could happen at a later stage. It also suggested there could be new participants who join the sandbox in the future. I think this is just one more news in a series of Very positive news around crypto regulation coming out from Hong Kong. I remember one of the most significant ones that we touched probably more than half a year ago was Hong Kong partnering up with a couple Middle Eastern countries for cross-border transactions and for finding a common standard for that. And they've been very quick to act on the ETFs as well, and thinking about stablecoin issuance from a government's perspective is very, very important in my opinion. And it's important. It's. I like the way. Let's put it like this. I like the way how Hong Kong is doing it by actually wanting to partner up with companies like Animoca, which are ultimately Web3 native and are coming from the crypto side, as opposed to building something in isolation and presenting that as a CBCD, as a CBDC, and not connecting that to basically the rest of the blockchain world, but having that build out in isolation and actually not being a usable product for Web3, but just a central bank digital currency. So I like this approach very lot, but also I've been talking for quite a while on my stablecoin monologues. I want to go to you to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's pretty bullish. I think that, the stablecoin business model is incredibly lucrative. If you look at Tether, I think they made 6.3 billion revenue last year, which is pretty insane for a team of maybe 20 or 30 people. So you've got low operating costs. And you look at BCG talks about, by 2030, they're predicting the tokenization or the market cap of tokenized assets to be sort of 16 trillion as a conservative estimate, 68 trillion by as a best guess. And of that, the lowest hanging fruit is going to be stable coins. So effectively tokenizing like local governments' currencies, getting that on chain. And then from there, you'd effectively then probably start tokenizing securities and more complex financial instruments. So I think that, the Hong Kong government's pretty progressive. Animoca as well in there. I think they're also, you've got NEOM, the NEOM investment fund. So in Saudi Arabia, they invested 50 million, I think it was last year, in Animoca, so in their fund. So you touched on the relationship between the Middle East and Hong Kong. I think Animoca is playing both of those, and there's been discussions around the potential IPO in 2025. And that could be potentially on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange or the Middle Eastern equivalent as well. They were obviously, back in 2020, they were listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, but then were kind of delisted due to regulatory reasons around crypto and the regulation around that. So I think like Animoca's come a long way. I'm pretty bullish. I'm intrigued to see how the benefit flows back to Mocaverse specifically, because I think they did kind of mention that in the announcement. It was like Animoca and Mocaverse. And the thing that probably strikes me is the decentralized ID that they're bringing out. So they've got the Anime Foundation involved. They've got One Football, which is like one of the biggest football things, and they're creating IDs for those specifically. I wonder if at some point they're going to have government IDs via Mocaverse, which would be pretty insane. To me, it's bullish. Like it'd be interesting to see whether other governments follow suit by integrating like Web3 businesses to help them build out their networks. But I'm in complete agreement with you.
Yeah, no, and just to add a bit of additional context to that, because they have released a Hong Kong, that is the paper, what it takes to become a stablecoin issuer. The original proposal was that stablecoin issuers must have the greater of 2% of the stablecoin issuance, or at least $2.9 million in capital. They actually reduced this percentage to 1%, but they also can adjust that on a one-by-one case, on a one-by-one case basis. And I think this is pretty interesting that it's not a very high hurdle. 2.9 M is not a very high hurdle to issue a stable coin. Like, I understand it's a sandbox. I understand this hurdle can be higher on a case-by-case basis. But it seems like they want to build this, or they want to offer the stablecoin issuance in a way that it's not a monopoly straight off the gate, but that there are actually multiple market participants who might have a chance of being part of Hong Kong's stablecoin issuance plans. And that's, again, another sign that I find pretty positive.
I think I also heard rumors that the MMA HKD is going to be issued. So the modern market Hong Kong dollar is going to be issued via that sandbox as well.
2024, 2025.
Oh yeah, it's coming.
It is coming, yeah. The first Spaces and YouTube show with its own stablecoin. Maybe moving on to from the cash minimum, moving on to the reserve part, like what does the stablecoin need to be backed against? Reserve assets must be high quality and highly liquid. The HKMA was clarifying what this means exactly. It means cash, bank deposits, marketable securities issued by government, central banks, or qualified international organizations with high credit quality. Overnight reserve repo agreements with minimal counterparty risk and the same quality backing. And that goes to the point that you were just making before, Sammy, tokenized versions of the above assets. And that's pretty interesting because that goes exactly into the RWA trend that we're speaking about. That basically, think about a repo agreement and think about a repo agreement as a tokenized NFT, and that being accepted as a reserve asset for a potential stablecoin. You know, maybe a bit of a complex sentence to digest, but that addition, tokenized versions of the above assets, is a very strong addition for me, because it also says that if you have a stablecoin that's backed by cash, cash can also be another stablecoin.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like the idea of it, but I think putting it into practice is going to be very difficult because you've got to get the whole industry, like the financial industry, up to scratch. And I think we've had so many issues with like proof of reserves and all this kind of stuff, from like getting sufficient like assurance reports and things. Like I think my concern is making sure that all these like audit firms are up to scratch in terms of being able to have the size of the teams to actually audit the reserves, to make sure that they do actually have that in reserve. Because I think that my concern is if you don't have or if you have the equivalent parts of cash and cash equivalents tokenized, like, is it actually redeemable one-to-one, or is it actually impaired? If you get slightly more exotic assets that are tokenized and backing these reserves, I think that would be my concern.
That's a very valid concern that they're also touching on in the other stablecoin requirements part. They are saying that stablecoin redemption requests should be dealt with in a timely manner. They clarified that this means 1 business day in normal circumstances. However, the issuer can request permission from HKMA for a longer period if there's a market stress scenario. Also, the consultation states that the anti-money laundering procedures should cover issuance, redemptions, transaction monitoring, and wire transfer requirements, and that the HKMA must authorize any additional stablecoins. What's unclear is if this is solely applying to new brands or currencies, or whether that also relates to the same brand being issued on a different blockchain. And the final point, which I also found pretty remarkable, that issuers can provide wallet services, and any other activities that they would be undertaking would require authorization. However, an issuer cannot lend money or conduct other regulated activities. And there will be transitional rules, but existing stablecoin issuers must apply within 3 months of the regulations coming into force. If not, they obviously have to shut down, just as a final comment.
Which I guess we saw with Paxos and BSD when they were under scrutiny from the US regulators. Literally all that TVL went out, and then they waived the actual like the case altogether. But by which point the amount of like tokenized is it MUSD or BUSD is pretty much gone. So
yeah, and I think this is also where that part they cannot do lending and issue stable coins at the same time is exactly to touch on that, to not especially create a situation where the reserves already might be complex to understand, because they can be tokenized versions of cash equivalents and other things, and then there's suddenly a DeFi component going on in the background of that you might not even be aware of. there's lending going on against the stable coin, and then you want to redeem, and many people want to redeem at the same time, and then you run into a situation where this thing is going to lose its peg. So makes a lot of sense to just rule it out from the beginning that you can't be a stablecoin issuer and have money lending activities, at least not under the same company entity umbrella.
Yeah, exactly. Just noticed in the comments we've got some auditors that are thanking us for worrying about their what they've got to do at work for this.
Yeah, Oxy was saying, thanks for worrying about us ex-auditors and our team size. Lol. Yeah, those are beautiful words to close the show on. I think it was quite a good discussion, Sammy. Thank you for co-hosting with me today. Thank you to everyone joining us up on stage. Thank you, Tiro. Thank you, Funky. And also thank you to everyone who's been once more super active in the YouTube comments, and that we have our subscriber number 400, Ray Cook, who said, just subscribed, welcome to 400. With that out of the way, we are going to be back on Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. And in the meantime, I wish you all a wonderful weekend.
Really been going back to